Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, coming to you 6 days a week as we interview whitetail experts and hear their traditions and personal stories of the hunt. Learn more about the latest gear, discover proven tips, and the latest strategies so you can make your next hunt a success. Now, here's your host, Bruce Hutchin.
Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. Yes, this is your host, Bruce Hutchin, and we're heading to Southern Indiana, and Michael Fuchs is a guest. And Michael does some work over at Dan Johnson's Sportsmens Nation, where he's a blogger. Michael, welcome to the show.
Yeah, Bruce, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, I get excited when I see young guys that really, are passionate as I am about whitetail deer. And when we traded some emails and then you came back with some really, insightful things. And we just really got to give a shout out to the hunting beast, Dan Infalt, because he taught me so much. And as we talked about in the warm up, he's helped you along the way. So you're taking his ideas and making your own. But let's just talk about your hunting tradition and how you get started in hunting.
Yeah, definitely. I want to give credit to Dan as well before we get started off, because without him, I wouldn't be where I am today. 2014, I started really listening to him and talking to him, and he reached out to me or responded to me multiple times, and we had some discussions. And so before I start, I just wanted to say thanks, Dan, and I'll go from there. But anyway, born and raised in Southern Indiana. Like you said, I've lived here all my life. My grandpa got me started off into hunting. Really, as soon as I was old enough to carry a gun, he was reaching out to my mom. It's my mom's father, and started taking me squirrel hunting. And then my uncle took me on my first deer hunt ever and killed a 6-pointer with him my first season, and pretty much hooked after that. I think I was about 12 years old or so, and I'm 29 now and ate up with it. It's eat, sleep, and live whitetail, man.
Want to become a smarter deer hunter? Know when to hunt, where to hunt, how to hunt? Well, Deer Hunting Institute Part 1 was created to do exactly that, because many people have told me they struggle with spending all days in the wood and never seeing a deer, only shooting does and young deer, leaving the woods empty-handed way too many times. Found Mr. Wonderful, but just couldn't get on him, having difficult finding a place to hunt. Recognizing possible mistakes you're making every year. Having tried and failed to find qualified mentors who deliver results. If you had these frustrations or struggles, go to deerhuntinginstitute.com, and there you'll find a 13-module course to help you solve these problems. Again, go to deerhuntinginstitute.com and find some answers. Now, how did you get tied up with Dan Johnson over at Sportsmens Nation?
He had reached out to me, and I talked to him about doing a podcast, and he was looking for some bloggers. And I don't have a Facebook account at the time. I think then I might have. I don't know if he reached out to me through Facebook or Instagram, one or the other, but he got in touch with me. And, I wrote a couple articles and did a podcast, and that was pretty much it. I talked to him via email, and he pretty much reaches out to me if he needs some material or content from me. But yeah.
Well, thanks for that. And how many articles do you have up?
I think I've written 4 or 5 articles for Dan, but I do a lot of writing personally, and I've got a ton of content I've written for myself. Really, it just hasn't been released, and that I just share with some close friends and my hunting partner.
So if somebody went to your Facebook page or Instagram page, could they read anything that you've written?
On my Instagram page, I think there might be a link in my bio, but you can get on Sportsmens Nation to access I think if you go to Sportsmens Nation and the About on the top headline, you can go underneath there and locate my name and there. But yeah, I think most or all the articles I've submitted to Dan are there on Sportsmens Nation.
Well, that's great. And it's great to see a young guy like yourself so passionate about hunting whitetails and a student of the game. And that's one thing I learned early on. You never know it all. And every single year I get schooled by one or two of my target bucks. And I'm hoping to close the deal. I've got one deer, been hunting for 3 years, and I just hope I get close to him. My buddy missed him last year, shot over his back with traditional gear.
Wow.
Like he said, he just didn't remember. He got too excited, and he's a pretty good shot inside of 20 yards. And
They don't call it buck fever for nothing, buddy.
And we've got three deer in that one swamp area surrounded by ag. It's just a perfect Dan Infalt property. And we know where they are. We know where they're bed. We know everything about them. And it's just getting them in the right place, which, folks, is extremely difficult. But enough about me, and let's get back to Michael. When I asked you the tactics that you wanted to talk about, the first one we're going to talk about is my transition from private farm hunting to public hunting. How did that happen? Why did it happen? And tell me about it.
Yeah, in 2014, I took a job up north working for Honda at the Civic manufacturing plant there. And I'd been hunting a private farm my whole life here in southern Indiana. And I got up there and started hunting some areas up there. I was living up there. And I had a very successful season that year in 2014. I killed my target buck, and that was the year I started talking with Dan. And at the end of that season, the farmer back here at home reached out to me, and everything around here, a lot of the private lands are all getting leased up. That's fine. I understand. There's business to be made, and the farmers got to pay their bills too. So he reached out to me and pretty much said it was going to cost a couple $1,000s to continue hunting that farm that I grew up on. And I thought about it, and after talking with Dan and having such a successful season, kind of doing my own thing and getting away from that farm that I was kind of caught in a comfort zone, I made the decision not to continue hunting that private farm. And from there on, I just started hunting. I hunt primarily all public land, and I've pretty much been set that way ever since. I honestly shoot, most cases I like public land over private. Anyhow, the more I find out, the more I hunt it, just because you can get into such big timber, and I'm learning, the more secluded I get, the more these whitetails, specifically big mature bucks, are creatures of habit, especially in terms of bedding. And, the further away I get from the beaten path and the less pressure that's put on these whitetails, the more consistency that I'm seeing as far as their bedding behavior. And a lot of the stuff that goes back to, Dan's tactics, I've been able to implement myself, and it's what's led to, my success over the past 5 years.
When you think about hunting on public land, tell me your process, how you figure out where the bucks are bedded on property that you just first time in. What does that look like?
First and foremost, what I would tell anybody, and what I'd tell anybody, because I have a ton of people reach out to me, and there's nothing more I enjoy than sharing this kind of stuff. But first and foremost, you got to learn how to read a topographical map. It's a must. So you've got to know how to read contour lines, and you've got to be able to break a map down. That's the number one thing. So working from there, there's many avenues, but the number one thing is for anyone wanting to learn buck bedding, specifically in hill country and the deep kind of stuff that I'm hunting, you've got to learn how to read a topo map, because I spend 90% of my time scouting. 90% of my efforts towards deer hunting is all starts at the map.
No, when you're looking at a topo map, contour lines sometimes get close together, and sometimes they spread out, and you can read a lot off it. What are the 3 things that you look for when you're looking for a bedding area for a mature buck?
Yeah, so if I'm looking in deep timber, I'm looking for ridges, which anytime you have a change in elevation, you're going to have tight stacked lines. So those tight stacked lines are going to be leading up to a ridge top. So you follow those tight stacked lines up to where it starts opening up and the lines become a little more spread out, and that's going to be your top of the ridge where they start opening up. And then if you want to get into more detail, I'm looking for leeward ridge sides. So the leeward, which when I say leeward, I mean the direction the wind's coming across. So I primarily target south-facing slopes. So I'm looking for the contour lines that are stacked up, working from south to north. And that leads into my tactics towards buck bedding and how a buck's bed will change in relationship to the wind. You know, if the wind's coming out of the north, that buck's going to be bedded on the south-facing slope every single time. And, you know, I generate multiple scenarios for multiple different areas and multiple different winds. And, you know, the wind just kind of acts as the compass for me as to where that buck's going to be bedded at.
Now, do you use Google Earth at all or Onyx Maps or, you know,
I use Onyx Maps. Whenever I first got into this, I was big on hill maps, but I hunt so much public land that, you know, to get property boundaries, I was constantly going back and forth from a DNR page or whatever to get your private boundaries versus hill map, which is going to show your contour lines versus your satellite imagery. But on my Onyx, you know, I've got all my public and private property lines, and then they've got the hybrid option on there, which you can stack your topographical contour lines over your satellite imagery. So I'm always swapping back and forth between my hybrid map on my Onyx and my topo map.
Folks, I hope you picked up that Michael, you know, is a 365 hunter, but the attention to details, he can do it right at his desk. He can do it at home. He can do it on his lunch hour. He can do wherever because he has digital Onyx maps and then he has paper, you know, in the topo maps. The thing that you mentioned and you really got to pay attention to is how the bucks use the wind and how they bed in relation to the wind. Now, do you look for saddles also?
Yeah, I definitely look for saddles. Saddles for me are more of leading into my rut hunting tactics. I like to target saddles whenever I'm rut hunting, and what I call a rut hunt kind of changes my tactics up a little bit versus early season. But yeah, saddles definitely a good travel area, typically for cruising bucks. You know, if I've got a leeward ridge, just say I got a wind out of the north and I've got a south-facing slope on a saddle where I've got a ridge top to the left of that saddle and a ridge top to the right. I've identified doe bedding on the top of that ridge. If I got a north wind coming across that ridge and that upper third in that saddle right there, you know, that's what I just named off as your benchmark rut hunt in deep hill country.
And what about if you get into ag land, which might be a little hilly, but it's not as hilly as maybe you're expressing, or, you know, you get in the swamps, which have some elevation, but typically they're relatively flat. How does your techniques apply there? Yeah,
I mean, most of the public land that I hunt is strictly hill country, and a lot of it's hill country that's leading into private agriculture areas. But, you know, I have picked up a few private farms the past few years. In fact, last year I killed my Kentucky buck opening weekend on a private farm, and I videoed my hunting partner killing our other target buck on opening evening on a private farm. But the bedding definitely is different on private farms. You know, at tight parcels, I'm seeing the bucks bed basically wherever they can get seclusion. Wherever there's no pressure existent is where they're going to bed. And you pretty much just have to learn the property to identify that. Versus in hill country, I'm seeing consistent leeward ridge bedding on deep hill country in the upper third, usually, but not always on a point. But yeah, back to your question on private farms and not so hilly areas, I'm usually seeing the bedding just in isolation, secluded, wherever that buck feels like he's safe. And this time of year, it's usually on the edge of a food source. And, you know, this time of year, I still do see they want to have the wind at their back and be watching that food source they're going to go out to, even if it is a flat land. they'll lay there and put their eyes on that field, or whether it's beans or alfalfa or whatever it is they're going out there to eat on, and they'll watch it all day and have the wind at their back all day. And so when they get up that evening, they know that they're safe to enter that field and to feed that night. But everyone says that the pressure pushes them back off their summer bedding, and I don't disagree that it influences it, but I think it's just more their natural cycle. That testosterone starts kicking in, and then the nature cycle of a mature whitetail buck is to just feed all summer and prepare for the focal point of their life, which is the rut. And at that point, they're ready to transition back to those core areas and get back into where they're comfortable at and where they're going to live at up until the following spring and summer.
Do you want to become a smarter whitetail hunter, knowing when to hunt, where to hunt, how to hunt? Over the past 4 years, people have asked me, hey, I'm struggling with spending all day in the woods and never seeing a deer, only getting opportunities at doe or young bucks, leaving the woods empty-handed too many seasons. Located the deer of a lifetime, but just flat out missed. Having difficulties finding a place to hunt, recognizing mistakes that you're making over and over again, and you want to eliminate them. Having tried and failed to find qualified mentors. Well, you've come to the right place. Why? Because Deer Hunting Institute Part 1 was created by me, Bruce Hutchin. It's a 13-module course that'll talk about being lost in the deer hunting forest. Never hunted. What is a hunter? What is an adult onset hunter? What rules apply? Finding a mentor, choosing a weapon, finding a place to hunt, scouting a hunt location, stand sites, stand access and exit, reading sign, and when to hunt. All these are available for you at deerhuntinginstitute.com. Go now to deerhuntinginstitute.com and sign up for the best deer hunting course in America. You just mentioned core area. Is that the same as home range?
You know, I would call it a home range, but when I say core area, I'm more referring to bedding. A lot of the deer I'm watching right now in the evening, they're bedding on the edge of a food source. But I've already identified the hill country and the ridge terrain through my winter and spring scouting and topo scouting of where they're going to be living once they make that transition, which I give it like a mile and a half radius from the food source. But I would call that the home range, you know, anywhere from that food source back into their bedding. It just, the time of the year is going to dictate what part of that home range they're spending the most time. It goes back to the first, Wired to Hunt podcast I ever listened to with Dan Johnson and Mark Kenyon, and then they brought Dan Infalt on, and he's made the statement that a mature buck's going to spend 95 to 99% of his daylight life laying in bed. And if you think about that, that only gives you 5% or less of an opportunity to kill that deer, to kill that animal while he's on his feet during light hours. And I think that when I heard that, it really opened my eyes. I must have replayed that 100 times just listening to that. I think it was podcast number 37 on the old Wired to Hunt podcast that I used to always listen to. But yeah.
That's interesting. But if you think about it, it makes sense, because the only time I think they spend more time on their feet is during the rut.
Absolutely.
I would even throw this out, and hey, if you disagree or agree, reach out to me at whitetailrendezvous@gmail.com. But I would say the bulk of his daytime activity on his feet is from October 20th to November 10th or a little bit later. For about 30 days, he's moving because, as you said, that's what he's born to do, breed and propagate the herd. And if you think about that, if you just want to go out and shoot a deer, that's probably the best time to do it if you can pick the right funnel and pinch point and those things, because we know the deer are up on their feet looking for bedding areas. Your thoughts?
Right. I don't disagree with you. I've got a love-hate relationship with the rut because, I mean, if I've got a particular animal that I'm interested in killing and it gets to be the rut and I haven't killed him yet, then you can roll your dice as to where he's going to travel, where he's going to end up. Whereas getting back to the buck bed, the hunting tactics and identifying these core areas down to the bedding area, I'm laying in their beds in the winter and spring and figuring out why they're here, when they're here, and when they're going to be here during the season whenever I have an opportunity to kill them. When the rut rolls around, you can almost just throw that to the side. My tactics are going to be completely different, and there's no telling what you'll end up stumbling upon during the rut. And that buck that you've been, his bed, right where he lives, he might get killed a mile down the road by a neighbor, and it's his 13-year-old on his first day hunting. And that's just luck of the draw, that's the hate part of it. But, there's nothing better than that action and that time of year being in the woods. It's magical for sure.
You just said something and my ears picked up. And if I heard it right, you'd say you actually go and get in the beds of the bucks that are around. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
And why do you do that?
Well, during my winter and spring scouting, to me, that's the one time that I'll step foot into these bedding areas, and it's the only time I'll go into the bedding areas until season comes whenever I'm going in to kill that animal. So I do it I want to know exactly why he's there, and I want to know exactly where he's going to travel when he gets up and leaves that bed. And so far, I haven't found the impact. My hunting for the following fall, I've been very successful with this tactic, but I just like to get into that deer's mind, and I want to know why he's bedded there, and I want to know when he gets up and the next 100 yards he takes are going to be in what direction, because in a few months I'm going to be in that direction in a tree, and I'm going to try to put an arrow in him. So that's why I do that.
Now, just break down, you see a buck bed and there's no snow on the ground. How do you know which way he gets up and moves?
Well, it depends on where the bed's at, first off. And if it's on a point, I'm laying down on that bed, I'm looking up over the point, and you'll usually find some sign around there, whether it's a rub line, whether it's a scrape. But I'm picturing certain bucks and certain beds in my mind just from this past season right now. But, I looked up down that point and I see a rub here, and I know it's a rub made from the buck that's laying in that bed. Then I see a scrape down the point, and I just kind of put that picture together as far as where he's going to travel when he leaves there, and always have point B in mind. It's have point A, which point A is always the bed, and then point B, where that deer is going to travel to, whether it's to go feed or to congregate with the rest of the herd. But if it's just on a ridge side, not a point, just on the upper third of your standard ridge, it's getting in that bed and reading that sign coming out of that bed. I'm always looking for tracks. If I got a bed that's 5-6 foot around and 50 yards from it going down the creek, there's a track I can't fit my hand in. It's 4 fingers wide. I know that's that animal. Document that, and after that, I'm just looking for a tree to get in, and I'll mark that tree, and I'll have 20 different scenarios like this by the time April hits, and all those are bucks that I've identified. Some of them I might have laid eyes on, and some of the funnest ones are the ones I haven't laid eyes on. I just know it's a big-ass deer, and I'm going to go in and hunt him, whether it's because his rub's as tall as my neck or I can't lay my hand in his track.
No, I'm just thinking about the farm that I hunt, and some things are dropping into place of where I've seen deer and everything. The one thing I have is that the one key bearing area that is most favored, it is on a south-facing slope, but it was logged, so it's just terrible. I mean, you can't.
It'll change the game when they start doing that.
Yeah, it's just absolutely, positively nuts. And even when we have snow on the ground and you can track them, you can't get in there. I mean, it just not going to happen. So, I'm thinking, okay, we're going to be some other things. So you're giving me a lot of food for thought. And If somebody wanted to reach out to you, Michael, what's the best way for them to, touch base with you and say, hey, you're bringing up some things that I've never really thought about. Can we talk?
Yeah, right now it's just on my Instagram page, Fuchs Outdoors. And even some of my deer-related posts, I always mention shoot me a message, and it's always nice. I've had numerous people reach out to me, and there's nothing more I love than seeing someone passionate be successful. And when I get that message or phone call or text of a picture, or whether it's scouting or they got a good one on the ground, it's great, man. So yeah, Instagram, and from there, there's some people I'll text and talk to, but yeah, Fuchs Outdoors on my Instagram page as of right now is the best way to reach me. I'll probably end up having a Facebook account again sometime in the future, but right now I'm not minding being away from it. Nothing's changed here. I don't advertise everything, but I can guarantee you there's not a day that goes by I'm not putting time and effort into the deer.
So let's transition. Okay, winter and spring, you've really zeroed in on a few bucks that you know where they are, they know where to live in, and you know where your tree's going to be. Now, what do you do in the summertime when they transition to grocery time and, they're up on their feet? Or
that's a great question. That's
laying in alfalfa basically all night. They get up, eat, lay down, go back and eat. So talk to me about that transition.
Yeah, absolutely. This time of year, it's a great time in the evenings to get out and glass. And then Indiana, the state of Indiana, it's legal to deer shine. So I'll go out spotlighting at night. I'm either looking at food sources within that home range like we talked about, of where I've identified these core areas where bucks are bedding. Certain areas, I know the exact deer that's bedding there. And the other ones, it's just sign that I've found in there in the winter and spring. And maybe it's not an area that I've circled back around to the summer to observe. So there's some new areas this year that back in the winter and spring, I was in some deep ridges and hill country on public land where I identified some good buck bedding. And now these food sources that they're living on and feeding on within a half a mile to a mile or quarter mile, however far it might be, now I get the opportunity to see what animal might have been responsible for laying in that bed. So getting to lay eyes on them now and knowing what I'm getting into going into the season when they get back into that area where I need them to be to get killed. So yeah, it's a great time of year to get out there. And there's also nights where I'll go out and glass or shine a new area, but I usually don't waste any time on areas unless it's somewhere where I've got potential or capability of hunting. So like I said, most of my time spent on public land. So right now I'm trying to find nothing but food sources within that home range out to a mile and a half of that public land that I'll be able to hunt, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Let's talk briefly about your use of trail cameras.
Yeah, I'm no trail camera guru by any means. In fact, as far as just a standard camera goes, I probably run more cameras in the winter and spring after season than I do any time, just to get inventory of bucks in known areas that had survived going into the following season. But I will say that trail cameras, if they're used correctly, can change the game. Last season, the bucks that my partner and I killed in Kentucky on the opener, without that cell camera, we were running the Bushnell wireless trophy cameras. It was able to send us pictures from the area we were hunting. Without that camera, we wouldn't have known that animal was there, and you're getting live data and inventory without even stepping foot there on the property, which is huge. And I mean, there's multiple areas right now going into Indiana season where we know bucks are living. We've been watching them feeding. We know the core areas they're going to move into, and we'll be utilizing cell cameras for this transition and just getting an idea of when they're back in that core bedding where we need them to be to get them killed. In that situation, if I put a cell camera up for that use, I'll do maybe a mock scrape at maximum. Most likely I'm just going to hang it where I know he's going to be traveling through. And I like to do that within the next few weeks before he makes that transition back there. And at that point, it's just waiting, and if I'm just throwing a date out there, if October 7th, I get a picture of him and it's a north wind, south-facing slope on a point, and he's going up in there at 4 or 5 in the morning to lay on that bed. Well, guess what? I know right where I'm heading that evening, assuming the conditions stay right.
Now, if you're that close, can he see you? Because you're approaching him from below, right, to get up into your tree. You're about 100 yards from his bed, and he's got the advantage of height. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. And that kind of goes back to why I lay in those beds, too, is I want to get that vision. How far can he see? There's certain beds looking downhill where a buck might be able to see 500 yards. There's other scenarios where he might only be able to see 100. And that's going to dictate how far I'm going to push it. And I'd be lying if I said I haven't gone in on these situations and jumped the deer I was trying to kill up, because I've done it before. But fortunately, when you're going in like that, the wind's always at your face. So I've jumped some big deer up and had them come right back and when they haven't winded me. If they don't know what you are and you run them out and they don't smell you to really detect it's a human presence in there, don't give up. They'll most likely be back, which is the beauty of going in upwind like that. But yeah, to get back to your question, there's some bucks I've watched get out of their bed, and there's others that I've known have traveled a couple 100 yards to get to where I've killed them. But yeah, at that point, you're trying to get as close as you can, but you don't want to get close enough he can see you. I want to be just outside that. If I know he can see 100 yards, I'm going to be 105 yards out from him set up. And I'm going to take my old glorious sweet time getting set up, be as quiet as I can, get in there as early as I possibly can, and take my sweet time. Any wrong move or any wrong noise, and whether it's a tink of the tree stand or you drop something, and the game could be over right there.
Hey, thanks for listening to the show tonight. Before we go, can I take a moment and say thank you? Listen, as we started the Whitetail Rendezvous podcast journey, we had no idea what to expect. But after 4 years, we received a ton of feedback from our over 400,000 listeners and climbing to 500,000. Speaking of which, we are now closing in on over 600 featured guests. Thank you. And a quick shout out to all those who have left an iTunes review and your feedback. I get those and really appreciate it. And it's awesome to see what you have to say, and we do read every single one of them. And I just want you to know that I am incredibly grateful for your kind words regarding the show. And all of the ratings and reviews help us attract more listeners. And if you're one of those new listeners, welcome. Great to have you. By the way, if you haven't taken the time to rate and review our show and like the Hunting on Private Land strategy on how to get permission to hunt a private property, go to whitetailrendezvous.com as a special gift for just rating and reviewing our show. When you get there, look for the start button to get the details. Listen, I'll share you the top technique from some of the top hunters in the country on how do they get permission to hunt on private land. I'll share with you the exact techniques they use to get permission. As my way of saying thanks for rating and reviewing the show on iTunes. So join us next time. And remember, we're all on this journey together, learning, sharing, and becoming 365 hunters. Well, Michael, at the beginning of this, you said you needed to be someplace, so it's 6 o'clock your time. You want to wrap up now?
Yeah, man. Time sure flies whenever we're talking whitetails, doesn't it?
It sure does, and I promise you.
Feels like I just picked up the phone.
You've just been a joy, and I look forward to, more conversations because we got a lot to talk about. Why don't you just recap the most important thing a person can do to target that mature buck?
Yeah, first off, you got to find them. You got to know there's a big deer in the area. If there's not a big deer there, you're not going to kill a ghost. And I think to stem off of that, like I said, just knowing those topographical maps and being able to read contour lines is just huge if you're hunting these hill country bucks like I am. But yeah, I would say that's the most important things there. there's just so many factors, Bruce. The list goes on, and I know that you know that. So
yeah, the game never stops, and I never stop learning, and you never stop learning, and I hope my listeners never stop learning.
Yeah,
Michael,
I agree, man.
It's just been a joy and to hang out with you a little bit, and hunting season's rapidly approaching. I just wish my travels would have taken me down to Southern Indiana. I'd love to spend a day with you. But having said that, maybe we'll meet up at one of the shows or something this winter. But definitely after the season, we will get together. We will, compare notes and keep building on a relationship. So with that, on behalf of hundreds of thousands of listeners of Whitetail Rendezvous, Michael, thank you so much for being a guest today.
Yeah, sounds great, Bruce. I appreciate it, and I look forward to our friendship, and good luck this season, buddy.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.